Hello, everybody. We are going to do something a little bit unorthodox on today's show. Something I've always kind of wanted to do is take a step back and talk about kind of the broader issues and things that really divide people, whether it be the left wing of the Democratic Party, whether it be the Democratic Party, like just like bigger, broader issues that aren't just the headlines of the day-to-day news, because that is really so easy to just sit down and make a show about the headlines of the day-to-day news. But I kind of wanted to do that today by doing something kind of interesting, is playing the premium episode 10 of Bad Faith, and kind of talking about it a little bit. It's a very, very long episode, but they do have it's hosted by the press secretary for Bernie Sanders, and this other guy who you're probably not going to like very much if you kind of are like probably older and have more sensitive ears and are kind of used to listening to kind of like the mainstream media. He's a little bit more crass as opposed to Bernie Sanders' press secretary, Brianna Joy Grant's Virgil Texas, who's been on the show, by the way. His voice has graced these airwaves, but a lot less crass because, I would have yelled at him in a big way. I would not have let that stand in any circumstances here on the Spencer Welsh Radio Network. But we will be playing this episode because it features a very interesting discussion and debate with Noam Chomsky. So we're going to dive right into that.
Say, yes, I want my grandchildren to survive.
So many people's grandchildren are already not surviving.
All right, just to pause it, we're already pausing in 14 seconds in. So the question there that got cut off a little bit, I apologize, was, so he said the question people are asking is, do you want your grandchildren to survive? But what Brianna Joy Gray is saying is that a lot of people aren't surviving. A lot of people's grandkids are not surviving as the way they are. Like, things aren't sustainable as the way they are, which I definitely think is true. But I think honestly they are both right in this situation, because things are like incredibly unsustainable. They're not in the point of just like structure in any kind of meaningful way right now, I think. But I also do think that things could get a hell of a lot worse. And I think that's where Noam's completely valid point comes in.
That's the issue.
Yes. You want to ensure that they'll live underwater or have a chance to survive.
So many people aren't thinking about living underwater because they're incarcerated or they're unhomed.
Then as an activist, your goal is to get them to think about it, because that is what is at stake.
So that was a clip of the upcoming interview Virgil and I did with Professor Noam Chomsky. It was a wild ride. What did you think, Virgil?
I think we won the debate. I think we proved we're smarter than them.
Yeah, so at this point, kind of, they go on, well, really, just Virgil really does go on to talk about a bit of, like, trash, talk a little bit trash, saying, oh, yeah, we won the debate with Noam Chomsky. He didn't do well. People are going to be convinced to vote for Joe Biden now, even, which is a pretty, people are going to be less convinced. He, like, saying he failed in his mission to convince people to vote for Joe Biden, which is a pretty controversial statement there. And we will see how accurate it is. I don't know if he was being kind of altogether serious, but we'll see. Opposed to the tenor of the debate, but apparently they got a pretty heated, and they definitely on Twitter got a lot of people to subscribe, me included, but pretty much only for the purposes of this podcast, because paying $5 a month like for podcasting, think about it. Say it over in your head. Like, think about how like lip curling that sounds. Like, you think I'm going to do that? I just can't in good conscience with myself. I just can't. Anyway, I think this is around the part where the actual interview starts.
You, me, and Joe Rogan, baby.
Yep.
All right. Well, this is Bad Faith, and this is
the introduction.
Noam Chomsky.
We're joined now by linguist, philosopher, cognitive scientist, activist, and author of the forthcoming book, Climate Crisis and the Green New Deal, Professor Noam Chomsky. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to echo what Virgil's sentiments are. your voice is so incredibly meaningful and persuasive as someone who is deeply respected, obviously, for both your scholarship and kind of your political opinions over the course of time. And so it made big news, understandably, a few months ago when you came out very strongly advocating for leftists who at the time were, many of whom were very frustrated by the way the primary season ended, to pledge their votes to Joe Biden.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, can you clarify then? What is your position?
What I said is 1,000 times, as loud as possible, you should vote against Trump. Now, it happens that there's a technical fact which says when you want to vote against Trump, you have to push a lever for Biden. But the left doesn't get involved in these games. The idea of making elections the be-all and end-all of politics is the mainstream conservative idea. The idea is politics is supposed to be restricted to electoral extravaganzas. You show up every couple of years and push a lever, then you go home. The official doctrine, I've repeated it, quoted it from the main sources, is you're supposed to be spectators, not participants. Your job as a citizen is to show up every once in a while, pick one or another of the so-called responsible men, and then go home. To use the phrase of the main writers on the topic, Walter Lippmann in this case, the ignorant and meddlesome outsiders, the public, have to be put in their place. They have a role to show up and vote now and then, period. Now, the left has always taken a very different view. Real politics consists of constant activism. Every once in a while, an event comes up in which you have to take a couple of minutes to decide whether it's worth pushing a lever to keep out someone who's truly dangerous. So if, in this case, the argument for that is simply overwhelming, is the most dangerous figure ever to have appeared in political history. So yes, take a couple of minutes, vote against him, then proceed back to real politics.
Yeah, we can pause it there. I do think there are some very, very interesting points in this, and I guess I would say, because you can make an argument that he is the most dangerous in history, and I think you would have to, at some point, just like not go a little bit off of Trump's record, and I think rely on, for your argument, the fact that this is such a chaotic time, especially with where we are with climate, where we are with economic inequality, just like the widening gap between the rich and the poor, and just the increasingly higher and more dire stakes in each election. So I guess that could be a little bit of a interesting perspective there. But and I did see this not from myself or anything, but from Twitter. Indeed, I will admit that him saying it only takes a couple minutes to go out and vote is not true for many, many people, especially in cities, especially African Americans, and that's going to make it tougher, especially in the time when there's a pandemic going on. Waiting for 7 hours, 6 hours makes it very, very hard, because that is a big, big commitment to make for so many people, and it all too often turns out to really be the people that Democrats need the most to win. I'm going to try and be fair with fair use, and we will not be playing all of this podcast, but we will be probably going about like a normal show's length into it, and I have to decide based on how I feel about it. Maybe we'll do maybe a part 2 on this, because depending on how interesting it gets. If it gets really kind of crappy, we'll cut it off, but still.
Which is the constant activism, which in fact has pushed Biden's program to the left of any of his predecessors.
And I mean, even there, I do buy the fact, unquestionably. I shouldn't, if I haven't made clear, if you're maybe new to the show, I'm pretty much like, I would say, if it were me, and I personally also don't really feel comfortable like telling any kind of left wing person what to do, not necessarily that they're left wing, but it's like, just based on what I've seen, I can understand I can really understand any position. Although I would really say I would definitely, if I were in a swing state, I'd vote for Biden because I think Trump is unequivocally worse. There's no denying that. But in a position where you're a lefty in kind of a state like New York, I would not feel any kind of compunction to vote for Joe Biden, because I just it's not. And again, I think that does kind of tie into what he says there about voting against Trump. And it's what he said there. I mean, if he's not talking about kind of strategic voting based on swing states, then I kind of think that just it makes and kind of a technical term in the sense that he used it, but still, it would be interesting to see.
And if it continues, can go more. But the principle is vote against Trump, then challenge Biden.
Well, I think the argument that's being made by some on the left, including myself earlier in this election cycle, was that by withholding one's vote, by saying I'm not going to vote for Biden, or as you say, against Trump unconditionally, you could continue to push Biden to the left at a time when he is most vulnerable because of his electoral position. So that endorsing him early on in the process, or endorsing him by virtue of saying you're going to vote against Trump, no one's talking about third-party votes as counting as against Trump, right? We're talking exclusively about votes for Biden. So I guess the question is, why? Mm-hmm.
Now let's try to be serious about it. To say there's an argument that says by joining the 50% of the population that doesn't vote, I'll somehow influence the Democratic Party. I think that's a pretty long shot.
Yeah.
There's another, yes, a very long shot. They don't pay attention.
And I mean, I do think it's interesting to say, the idea of trying to, in kind of almost a labor type way, organizing your vote, you're organizing workers in a union or something to withhold your vote for certain promises. If that was the case, that would, I think, probably be a pretty effective measure. But I really don't think that it's going to be things are even that organized. It's kind of crazy to say.
To the 50% who don't vote. There's another proposal, which is say, keep the activism going, compel the program to move to the left, as was done, and then vote against Trump and vote and challenge Biden. Keep pushing it to the left. These are two strategies, okay? But in neither case is it a matter of voting for Biden. It's a question of which strategy you use to push the party to the left. One is, I'll keep quiet. The other is, I'll get engaged, the way the Sunrise Movement was, the way the Sanders campaign was, and succeed in pushing the program considerably to the left. In fact, the actual program on crucial issues, like, say, climate change, despite the resistance from the DNC, turns out to certainly be better than any predecessor and not too bad and can be pushed farther.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way he kind of qualified it there is pretty telling, but I also think that a lot of this stuff isn't really kind of concrete. And once we see the naivete here, once we see, I think there's kind of a surprising bit of naivete there to say that that Trump, Biden, I mean, he may feel the perfect need to go buy them, but in terms of expecting him and his administration, knowing what we know about Biden and his entire career, to stick really kind of closely by these policy proposals that he isn't really running on. He says he doesn't support the Green New Deal. He says he doesn't support fracking. Does that stick to the kind of the spirit of his economic plan? I mean, not really. And if he's already appearing so weak on these, what else is he going to do when it comes to crunch time? Do you think that's the first thing that they're going to have out the gate? Do you really think that they're going to go out of their way to spend political capital on climate change and really push that forward? I mean, there's only so many things the White House can do at one particular time. It's not like they're going to be able to kind of do all that stuff and expend a massive fight on getting this climate change deal done. But I mean, maybe they may do some policies. I mean, but if you can really, I mean, it does kind of suck, because I guess if you want to go out, if you want to go vote, I mean, you would, if you had to choose somebody, even if someone's marginally better, that would technically make them better, and therefore the choice. But it like